you got into nutrition in college doing undergrad. I'm curious to see like how is your nutrition now compared to how it was when you were playing pro rugby?
So it fluctuated because, when I was first starting out and playing, I was just eating what we were supposed to eat, mixed diet with, carbs and vegetables and protein and a bit of fat. And that's what I thought was normal. But then when I was in my undergraduate degree at the University of Washington in Seattle, I took a class on cancer biology. And so we were learning in cancer biology that plants use defense chemicals in order to protect themselves. And this is just a normal thing that any botany class will tell you. Anybody who studies horticulture or botany can certainly tell you this, that plants have different defenses because they're living organisms, and all living organisms have a defense against being eaten. And while animals can run away or fight back, plants can't. And so they need to use other methods. And one of those methods is by being actively poisoned, making defense chemicals. And this is something that can cause inflammation and screw with your body and your cells and precipitate cancer. So we call them carcinogens. So because this was cancer biology, we were looking at mostly from a carcinogen point of view. And we learned that Brussels sprouts had 136 known human carcinogens in them. White mushrooms had over 100. Spinach, kale, lettuce, celery, cabbage, cucumber, broccoli, you name it, they had 60, 80, over 100 known human carcinogens each, and they were quite abundant. We know from the work of Professor Bruce Ames at UC Berkeley, published a paper in 1989 showing the toxins in plants versus pesticides that were sprayed on them because they were trying to make pesticides illegal. They're saying, hey, these are poison, we shouldn't use these. He's saying, yeah, they are poison, but we've been using these for 80 years. We've never had a problem. So, let's take a look at it. And he found that just the toxins that they knew about at the time, which were not as many as I learned about in my undergrad, that there were 10,000 times more naturally occurring poisons in vegetables like spinach than in the pesticides that we sprayed on them by weight. And that the naturally occurring toxins were far more likely to cause cancer than the pesticides we sprayed on them. So they were really a drop in the bucket. And this is why we still have pesticides, because they were trying to get them illegal, but they're like, no, actually, objectively, they aren't actually worse than the plant itself. And so if you want to eat the plant, then you shouldn't have any problem with the pesticide. And I think we're using sort of different ones now. The glycophosphates and things like that weren't, I don't think, tested at the time. So that might be a different argument. But certainly for what we were using at the time, they were specifically in that study, we're looking at alar, which is what they used for apples at the time. So obviously different things can be different. But either way, we were blown away by this. And, because your whole life you're getting told that, just vegetables are where you get all your nutrients. This is the most important thing you can eat. They're very, very healthy, and that meat's bad. And I remember thinking in my head, I was like, but vegetables are still good for you though, right? And my professor just looked at us and he just sort of shook his head and he just said, I don't eat salad. I don't eat vegetables. I don't let my kids eat vegetables. Plants are trying to kill you. So I was like, right, screw plants. And I just stopped, and I defaulted into a carnivore diet just because I just did not want to eat plants. And so I went to the grocery store. I was like, well, everything has plants in it. Everything has vegetables. Everything has, grains or rice or whatever. And so I just defaulted in eating eggs and meat. And this was, while I was playing rugby, and my athletic performance and ability just went through the roof. It just absolutely shot to the stratosphere. I stopped drinking during the rugby season at the same time, and obviously that contributes. But again, alcohol comes from plants, so that's not that's sort of in line with that whole thinking as well. But I got to the point where I literally couldn't get tired. I couldn't run out of energy, and I couldn't get sore. I don't get sore anymore. A lot of people on a carnivore diet or even a keto diet notice this. They get much less sore. And, I attribute this to different defense chemicals causing inflammation and soreness and irritability in your healing tissue that increases pain. And we see this in chronic pain patients as well, that, fibromyalgia is going away. They go on a carnivore diet or even keto, but carnivore seems to help more. Getting rid of their fibromyalgia, getting rid of their radiculopathy, chronic pain in their shoulders, arthritis pain. People that, Dr. Sean Baker talks about how when he was just putting people on keto, they were getting ready to do like a total knee replacement, bone-on-bone arthritis. And then, a month before the surgery, they say, hey, doc, I'm not in pain. I don't think I need surgery. Just from dietary changes. And so I certainly noticed that. I always had very bad back pain. even as a teenager, and then all of a sudden I didn't have any. I could just sprint nonstop. I had to work up to it, obviously, but I did work hard, and so my fitness just spiked, and so I just had exponential gain, and I was able to push myself and get fit enough to the point that I actually couldn't wear myself out. I could just sprint and sprint and sprint and sprint and could not get tired. And I remember thinking the amount of work I was doing, I was like, I could probably just sprint a marathon and just win it. And I was thinking, I'm like, that might be cool, just like break a world record on a first ever marathon. But like, I just thought the idea of just running for 26 miles is just the most boring thing ever. Yeah. And so I just never did it, but I fully regret it. And I remember thinking at the time, like, I'm going to regret this if I don't do it, because I will never be in this good of a shape again in my life, and I never will. And so like, it's it is a shame that I didn't do that. But yeah, my performance went absolutely through the roof. I was able to push myself and excel far past anybody else that I was playing with or against. And this was was commented on by people I was playing with. They were like, you just like, no one is as close to as fit as you, and can do the things that I could do. But it was when I went to England and was playing there, and I didn't really have the same access to food and meat. Some of the meat was breaded, and I sort of started thinking, is that big of a deal if it's breaded? And it did. It made a big deal, and it made a big difference. And I remember thinking a few months into it, like, why am I not feeling as like superhuman as I normally do? I didn't really know what was going on. I thought maybe I just wasn't working as hard or pushing myself. But that was the beginning of my decline, nutritionally, because I started slipping off things. I started with, breaded, crumbed meat because it was just easy and accessible. And then, I had maybe started putting some like ketchup on things. Then all of a sudden one day I thought like, maybe we can all make French toast. And I didn't even think about like, why are you doing that? That's a plant, and then you just slip off of it. And then it wasn't until like sort of 5 years ago that I sort of, realized that humans actually are carnivores. This is just the kind of animal that we are, and this is the way we should be eating. And then I look back and I'm like, that's what it was. That was the difference. And that's why I stopped feeling as good, is because I slipped off of it then. So now I'm back on it, and I'm just feeling as good as I did in my early 20s.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it amazing how just like one small meal, whether it's having cheesecake or ice cream or this, and then you sort of make these concessions. Well, I had that last night, so then today I can have the chocolate bar, the cookies, and then it's like just a snowball rolling downhill, picking up negative inertia in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think it is good to be maybe not a zealot, but to eat clean and to not sort of have these cheat days and things like that. Yeah.
Well, I think that, if you make an excuse once, you'll make it 1,000 times. If you say like, well, it's like little things, it's like, are you going to miss your kid's birthday? It's just like, well, I miss it this year because it's a good reason. Well, then there are good reasons to do anything. And if you find a reason to do something, you can find a reason again. Or like drinking, if people, don't want to drink, like I don't really drink anymore. But because I just feel so much better when I don't. I prefer feeling great to feeling drunk sometimes. And, but sometimes I will, but it'll be for a very specific occasion. And it's not just kind of, someone twisted my arm, but you have to be very careful of that. And I would never drink during the rugby season, because again, like you make one concession, like you'll do it again. And so it was just hard ruled, no, during the rugby season, I will not drink at all. And when I did that, I was able to stick to it. And cheat days, I think, are, probably a bad idea, because a lot of people, you have to contend with like food addictions, and carbohydrates are certainly addictive. Fructose actually is chemically addictive. It gives a dopamine response to the addiction centers of your brain, just like cocaine, heroin, meth, gambling, and we can measure this, we can track this, and because dopamine is an excitatory molecule, it turns your neurons on, and when your neurons are on, they're actually being damaged, and they have to turn off cyclically to heal themselves. That's why sleep's so important. You can actually permanently damage or even kill different portions of your brain due to excess excitation. So this is how, when they say like, oh, you're going to, pop holes in your brain if you do these drugs, that's really what they're talking about, is that you're having this constant dopamine hit, and you're just keeping these neurons firing all the time, and eventually they die off. And so we actually see in MRI studies that people that are addicted to methamphetamines, they kill these areas of their brain, their functional MRIs, you give them a hit of amphetamines or whatever, this area of the brain will just barely twinkle. But you give that same dose of amphetamines to someone who's metabolically unwell, who's a sugar addict, same barely twinkle. So it actually kills the same areas of your brain as meth. So this is a real drug, and it's really addictive, even though it doesn't give us a big high. People think that, a drug is only as bad as the high it gives you, but that of course isn't true. Something can be very bad for you and not even get you high, like arsenic will just kill you. I haven't heard anybody, dosing arsenic for fun, but fructose is one of those. It's highly toxic. It's highly addictive. It breaks down into the same byproducts as alcohol. So it causes the same damage: fatty liver disease, cirrhosis, diabetes, heart disease, and it's even implicated in cancer and Alzheimer's. So this is a really, really bad drug. And so having a cheat day for a highly addictive, damaging drug, I think is a bad idea, because all you're going to do is just get yourself addicted again. It's going to make you want that more. You're going to be addicted again. Then for the next few days, you're going to be thinking like, oh, I really just want that drug. It's like having a cheat day for smoking or for cocaine. That's just called a weekend, I guess. You just do drugs on the weekend, but that's the same as a cheat day. You one day a week, you're eating all this crap, or you're doing drugs, or you're drinking alcohol, or you're smoking cigarettes, and so you do that on the weekends. Fine, that's better than not doing it every day. But what you're doing is you're keeping yourself addicted, and you're hating your life all throughout the week, and you're thinking about this. And by the time you're actually coming down off that, and you're actually probably getting to a point where you're not going to miss it too much longer, you re-addict yourself. And sometimes you'll binge on it because, this is my day, so I'm really going to go after it. So I think those are counterproductive to have a cheat day, because after a couple of weeks, you stop having the addiction, and you can just move on with your life and just not miss it. Like I really don't care. Like I like candy, like who doesn't? But I don't miss it. I really don't care at this point.
It's a great way to reframe this hyperpalatable processed food, that it is really, there's an underlying addiction that's woven into that. Because, you during COVID especially, you would see Chick-fil-A and Jack in the Box. We're hearing about how this virus is disproportionately impacting obese and diabetic and hypertensive people. Yeah. But people would still feed their addictions by going to the fast food, which to me made no sense knowing the biology. But then I started to think, okay, well, people are still going to binge drink and do this. So there must be something or psychological here, an addiction of sorts. So yeah, I definitely want to speak to that more and talk about honey and fruit. Mm-hmm. But going back to sort of the to sort of putting a button on the physiology of rugby, you mentioned your recovery was better, and we encourage exercise so much. Do you think that you're just reducing sort of the background smoldering inflammation by eliminating some of that immunologic noise, so to speak, by getting rid of the processed foods and some of the plant chemicals, and that's why your recovery was better at that time?
Yeah, and I think that's the main factor there is, you're not limiting yourself. You're not getting all these plant toxins that are causing a whole bunch of inflammation and stopping your body from healing properly. And also you have an abundance of proper nutrition. You have a lot of fat and cholesterol and protein, as you're giving your body exactly what it needs, and you're not giving it any of the crap that screws you up. And so, it's, that was a big difference for me. Like the day after a game, normally for me, I was just absolutely in pieces. I was sore because I would play very, very hard, and I would again be very, very physical. And so I really made it a point. There'd be some games I would play in the back row, so 7 or 8. I really loved open side flanker. That was always my favorite position. But I would go at it in a very defensive mindset. And so I was really focused on just making as many tackles as I could and just really terrorizing people. So I would make sometimes, 30 to 40 tackles in a game at very high impact, and, and then running the ball and doing other sorts of things. And so that takes a lot of toll on their body. And I would sort of almost pride myself like how crippled I was, like the days after that, like that's how hard I was going. But it really did take a lot out of you. And it was very painful and difficult to just be alive and go to school and do anything. And so once I switched to that, like the next day, all of a sudden I was feeling better. I was like, I could go for a workout. Whereas it was usually until like the Tuesday that I was still recovering. And especially if we would go out drinking after the game, like I would only drink that one day a week, but I would still be like feeling like I was running booze out of my system, like on the Tuesday night practice. And then after that, I'm just starting to get back to normal. So it took a long time to get this stuff out of my system. And I basically have recovered from the damage I did to myself on that Saturday night by the Saturday game. And so just by eliminating that nonsense out, the alcohol out certainly, but also the rest of the plants. Like Sunday, I was feeling better, and I was feeling really good. And actually, not only did I not feel as damaged, but I actually felt like I was already improved. Like Saturday was a really good workout, and now I'm already stronger. And then Monday I was even stronger, and Tuesday I was stronger and faster. And so, I think that it has a lot to do with what not to eat as much as what to eat, because I see a lot of people now that I help out or talk to online. They're saying that like, oh, well, I'm doing this carnivore diet, but I'm not getting the same results you are. Oh, I wish I would. And you talk to them, and quite often they think of a carnivore diet as you're just eating a lot more meat, and that's great. That's certainly part of it. But they're still having some things that they shouldn't, and they're sort of holding back their results. And just a little bit actually ends up doing a lot physiologically and metabolically. And so it's just sort of eliminating out those last little bits. Then all of a sudden they get this explosion in results. So even a little bit of these plant chemicals and obviously very little carbohydrates will derail your metabolism and get you out of your primary metabolic state, which is taught to be a fasting state, which I disagree with. I think that's our primary metabolic state. I think that's where all of our heavy machinery comes to bear. That's the biochemical position of most animals in the wild, and including humans who are just eating carnivore, like the Inuit and so forth. But eliminating out the last vestiges of plant toxins and carbohydrates, I think make a huge difference. Yeah. And so that takes a huge toll on your body. And so, that is probably one of the most important parts of recovery.
And usually, obviously it varies person to person, but what would examples of those foods be for people? Is it fruit? Is it grains? Is it sweet potatoes? Like, what do you find? Is there any commonalities with that?
Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor at Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right, thanks guys. So quite often, people will still have little things, and like have coffee. A lot of people like coffee, and they'll like sweeten it with different sorts of things. A lot of people will have like different sort of treats with a lot of artificial sweeteners, and I think that's a hard one for people to give up. Or even energy drinks. A lot of people like energy drinks, and it gives them energy, but these things do other things in their body as well, and obviously they have a lot of artificial sweeteners. And then there's been a rise in people eating fruit and honey, and having just fruit, honey, and meat. And that's nice. I'm sure that's enjoyable, but the fructose is a harmful, addictive substance, and it causes harm in your body. And so I don't think that that's necessarily the right thing to do. In fact, I feel very strongly that it's the wrong thing to do, because it's it's still fructose. And so people will argue, well, in the matrix of the fruit, maybe it's better, but there's actually no objective evidence to suggest that that's the case. That's just something that someone said because they hoped it was true, probably, but there's no actual evidence for that. And in fact, there was a study that just came out that Dr. Baker told me about, that they put people on isocaloric diet, and they just had one group, and it was a randomized control trial, where they had one group eat 4 more pieces of fruit a day, and the other one eat less than 2 a day. And these were people who already had metabolic disease and fatty liver, so it's a specific cohort. But in the group that was eating the same amount of calories but eating more fruit, they had worsening of their metabolic syndrome. They had worsening of their fatty liver disease. So the idea that fructose in fruit or honey somehow acts differently is well, it's just not borne out by the evidence, and it's has nothing necessarily to suggest that it's so. I know Dr. Saladino said that he was in a discussion with Dr. Gundry from the plant paradox, and Gundry was saying, look, fructose is really bad. It's a bad guy, and Paul said that he challenged me and said, okay, well, can you show me a study that shows that the fructose in honey and fruit are as bad as, the fructose in table sugar or whatever? And it's like, I don't have one. And it's like, okay, but do you have a study showing that it's not as bad as the other ones? So there's no evidence one way or the other, but actually now there is evidence showing that the fructose in fruit is causing worsening metabolic syndrome, worsening fatty liver disease as well, versus less fruit isocaloric. And so, I think that is a major one that's holding people back. I've spoken to a lot of people, because this is an addictive substance, a little bit of fruit and honey can turn into a lot of fruit and honey very quickly. And that is a very big problem. And so I've spoken to a lot of people over the years who have listened to that advice and say, I can eat fruit and honey. Like, okay, I'll do that. And then they start eating a little bit and a little bit more and a little bit more. And then all of a sudden they start eating grains again. They're eating pasta. And within 6 months, they're eating pizza and ice cream on the couch, and they've gained all the weight back, and they've got all the health issues back again, and they don't even realize how they got there. And so I think a lot of people, especially that come to a carnivore diet or a ketogenic diet through looking for a better outlet because they have some sort of serious chronic illness or food addiction, I think it's vitally important for them to really steer clear of these sorts of things, because it can really lead you down a bad path.
Yeah. It's a good point, because a lot of people do come into this because they were morbidly obese or have a lot of excess fat to lose, and being aware of, like, that'd be analogous to telling someone who was an alcoholic, like, hey, look, you can drink on Saturdays, man. You're good.
That's
like,
it.
Monday through Friday. And so we need to be aware of the that addictive element, which is important. Some people would say, I will have fruit periodically, mostly if it's in season, like when berries come in season, but it's not like a staple, especially I'm not going to have like dried mangoes in January. When we have some apples, I'll eat that, but it's really, for me, and I would love you to critique me, it's around exercise. So for hiking, if I'm doing a lot of working out, maybe I'll have like an apple in the post-exercise window, or bring some on a hike with me or something. So that's sort of the context that it's in. But I feel like a lot of people are not exercising enough to sort of metabolize any of these things. What are your thoughts with that?
Yeah, well, I think that's, if you're going to do it, that's certainly the way to do it. And, fructose has been shown to be one of the better ways of replenishing your liver's glycogen levels. So it's a very quick way of doing that. But when you're on a carnivore diet, or even a ketogenic diet, your body's going to be replenishing your liver glycogen, muscle glycogen pretty much constantly. There were studies from wolves back in 1981 looking at this, and the idea was you have to eat carbs in order to burn carbs. And they say, okay, well, what about wolves? They don't carbo load before they chase caribou for 10 hours. They just go, and they found that do they even have blood sugar? Do they even have glycogen? And they found out yes, they do, but it's rock solid. It doesn't change. And so no matter what they're doing at rest or an activity or after activity, it's very, very stable. And so this means that your body's constantly replenishing what they're using as a fuel source, which is great. And so I don't think you necessarily need to. I mean, you play with it yourself. If you feel better and you feel that that's giving you something, go for it. But like you say, fruit is seasonal. And fruit is also very different now. It's been modified through selective breeding and GMO practices more recently to be very sweet. And so like a natural mango is not that sweet. It has a lot of fibrous components to it. It's very, very tough to eat, and it's got a big old seed. So it's not the same sort of thing as the mango that we would get at the store. And so that's certainly not what our ancestors, the mangoes that we have now, or even the apples that we have now, are different beasts compared to what we would have found in the wild seasonally. And the idea that we have to have these things. Now, if you want to have these things and you find that they benefit you somehow, I'd go for it. I feel great without them, and I feel that I perform the best with just pure meat. But I've spoken to people, and they just really feel that that's something that adds to them in their workout. Fine, go for it. That's I'm very much in favor of adults living their own life. But the idea that you have to have carbohydrates, that you have to have fruit or honey, that to me I think is a big stretch, because the people living in the ice ages did not have access to fruit or honey, and and people say, oh well, people were mostly living towards the equator. No, they weren't. There's a lot of archaeological evidence of actually, after we came up with fire, people migrating north during the ice ages. Dr. Bill Schindler, who, we saw at KetoCon, he was talking about this very specifically. And that is what the fossil record shows, is that when the ice was coming down, humans were moving up, and so there was no fruit and honey going up, but there were mammoths, and they liked mammoths. And, people crossing the land bridge across the Bering Sea from Russia over to Alaska to populate North America, where was the fruit and honey there, So the idea that you need it is completely fictitious. If you want it, go for it. But, the argument that, you're going to screw up your thyroid, you're going to get electrolyte imbalances, you're going to mess with your hormones. Well, then how did we exist during the ice ages going north? And how are the Inuits alive now? How am I alive now? Low thyroid is devastating. It can be fatal. And when a pregnant woman has low thyroid, that is very, very damaging to the child. You get a condition called cretinism, which is very obvious. They have short stature. They have physical changes to their facial characteristics, and they have a very low intelligence. It really damages the development of their brain. And so, and you call someone like, you cretin or something, that's what they're referring to. Like all the best insults are actually like medical terms and things like that. Like idiot, that actually means someone who has an IQ in the range between 0 and 30. Imbecile is 30 to 50. And then moron was, 70 to 90 or something like that. And, 50 to 70 or something like that. Yeah. And so now, and that's like been all the insults. Now they've changed those since then because they've had these negative, stigmas and things like that. But so that cretinism is a very devastating congenital condition. You would have an entire population of people with cretinism in those conditions if carbohydrates cause that. But you don't, and you have these people living generationally and perpetually without that. And so that's clearly not happening. So that doesn't even really pass the smell test. And they're, with all the different, WHO guidelines on eating and all these different sorts of governmental recommendations, all of these people are still agreed that there is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. You do not have to eat carbohydrates at all in your life. There are multitudes of examples of entire civilizations that have never eaten carbohydrates. So that's certainly not the case. You do not have to eat carbs. And I would argue that you're better off without them. But if you want to eat them, great. But you certainly don't have to have them.